I feel like I'm fighting something in there. Oh, there it goes. All right, this looks perfect. We'll see. Crap. Let's do a CPU swap. So this is an LG V50 Android phone that was butchered by another repair shop. And now we got to get this to power on so we can get the customer's data. The best way to do that when you're in a scenario like this where we can't figure out how to repair it, we got to now transplant the CPU and RAM and the UFS memory chip to a working motherboard so we can get it to power on. We need it to stay on long enough to back up the phone. We need it for touch to work, for there to be image. So this is just for data recovery. So if you need your data recovered, make sure you guys check out the links down below so you can contact me through my website and I can send you a quote. So let's go ahead and get started with this CPU swap. So this is an LG V50 ThinQ 5G phone. First thing I like to do is look up the CPU model. So if you Google search the model and then search specs, there's usually a website that has, all the device specs. And what you'll notice is somewhere around here you'll find it'll say like Qualcomm, then SM8150. This is the CPU. So it'll either be SM something, SDM, MSM. There's different models and everything, so you have to look out for that. And then we have to get the stencil. So this is the stencil right here, the SM8150, and you'll see there's actually two sides. There's A and B. So this is the RAM that sits on top of the CPU, and this is the CPU itself. So this stencil is the Qianli Bumblebee stencil, Qualcomm CPU 6. It's called, there's like a little bumblebee. So I'll link this down below in the video description as well. And then this is just a generic UFS stencil. So it'll be one of these patterns for the memory chip. Then this is the donor phone. So as you can see, this is one that I bought on eBay. It's just for parts, but you can see it turns on and it's functional. So the idea is you want to get a working motherboard that you're going to transplant the customer's chips onto here. So this is confirmed working. Also, this is the customer's housing. So I have two housings to test with, but I've confirmed both of them are good, so parts are not going to be an issue. And here's the two motherboards. So this is the customer's board. I removed all the shields because I was trying to fix it so I could get their data, but that was unsuccessful. So now I have all the shields removed and easy access to the CPU and RAM and the memory. This is the donor phone that is not touched by any soldering, so it's fully functional. And now we got to get the shield off so that we can get access to the CPU and memory. We got to prep that area because we're going to transplant from here to here. And as a good measure, it's always good to mark your devices. So this is my donor phone, so I'm just going to write donor on it so that in case anything happens, I'll know for sure this is the working board. And then this is the customer, so I'll just put CX as kind of a code for a customer. I'll just write it in a few different spots just so that there's no confusion anywhere. All right, so now we got to remove this shield. Best way to do that is with hot air. So let's put some flux all around the perimeter. Now keep in mind, we only do CPU swap when all else fails. Don't just jump to CPU swap as the first thing you try when trying to get data, because this is a very risky job. So we're gonna tin the perimeter with some low melt. This is 138 solder. Make sure you have your fume extractor on. A lot of fumes here. And I'm using the knife tip. I'm actually using a genuine JBC tip right now on my Action T3B. So the goal here is to tin as much as you can. There's some spots where you can't reach with your iron because there's components or connectors and stuff. So that's fine. Just do what you can. I think just even adding solder to the shield itself helps kind with the solder, like the solder being molten on there just helps spread heat, and you really just want to saturate the shield with heat so it desolders. So just do that. By the way, if you're watching this video, make sure you guys check out the links down below in the video description, because I'll have this t-shirt. I would do it, but I don't have the tools, so I'm sure a lot of you repair shops have heard that from customers. So I have a t-shirt about it. Let me get this. Let me know what you guys think of the t-shirt design. I think a lot of us can resonate with that. Like the customer will act like it's just a simple job, and I would do it too, but I just don't have the tools, you know. So that's basically why they're paying us the big bucks, right? All right, so now that I got low melt solder all around as much as I could, now we got to get the shield off. So I'm gonna use, let's just use 420, all right, 430, and I'm gonna turn on my airflow to 70. These shields are very heavy in thermal mass, so it requires a lot of heat. So I'm gonna start here on this side and just kind of heat in circles. I'm gonna leave the sticker on as well, because one of the things I like to do is test the board. After I take out the shield, test the board, see if the board still turns on. I want to make sure I didn't mess anything up. So just heat it, and then using a flat tool, like I like to use the hook tool, try to see if you can get underneath the shield. So once you get underneath, you can pry it up a lot easier. And I'm here in this area where there's no components that I could bump by accident. Alright, oops. Just barely insert your tool. Don't go too far because you don't know what's underneath. Oh, I do have the customer's board that I'll remove the shield on. By the way, I am burning that connector, but that doesn't matter for data. I got underneath. Oops. You gotta be careful too, because the low melt solder is molten, and if it flicks like that, it's gonna potentially send solder flying to your face. So right now, I got my tool in here. Now we gotta just pry up the rest. If necessary, you could add more flux if you want. And at this stage, I do like kind of just focusing on the next area that should lift up. That way it keeps lifting up section by section, and eventually it'll just all come off. Sometimes it does take forever, like right now. Alright, here it goes. Alright, so once it kind of tilts up, I like to then grab my tweezers and just kind of wiggle it off. There we go, we're in. Add some flux. Yeah, you can see all the low melt solder just went flying everywhere. So you want to make sure you clear that. The best way to do that is with some flux, and then with your iron. You want to make sure you didn't intentionally bridge random stuff. So knife tip. Just run your iron. Remember, this is the donor board, so we don't want to mess this board up in this process. Whereas the customer's board at this point doesn't matter, because we're gonna destroy that board to just get the chips off. Alright, I mean, everything else looks fine. Like I said, that connector doesn't matter. I think that's a camera. So we don't really need that for data, so we're just gonna leave it as is. And let's go ahead and test this board to see if it boots. All right, so I have put the board back in the housing. I just need charging port, screen, and battery. And then I'm gonna plug it in, make sure we still have power. Yeah, look at that, it still turns on. So I didn't screw anything up. Battery symbol is there. Yeah, it looks like it's booting. So the shield removal was not detrimental to the motherboard. Now we can continue removing the CPU and the UFS to prep it for the transplant. So one of the nice things about this model is there's no components here on the sides that will get in the way. This one, yeah, kind of. Well, there's some spots that there's a lot of space on here. So that's good. So first, let's remove the memory, which is this one. You can clearly see it says 128G, which is 128 gigs. This is the donor phone, so that doesn't really matter. Customers might be different. Also, before I do that, you want to pay attention to the orientation dot. So on this one, it goes on this corner. So I'm going to just scratch the board here to kind of remind me. Obviously, I'm recording this, so I could just look at the video, but I always do this. And then for the CPU on this side, we're gonna do the same thing. Just basically look for a blank spot on the board. You don't want to do this where there's traces and stuff. Now this is a baseband chip. I just know that because it's very similar looking to the iPhone ones. It says Qualcomm, it says SDX, some number. This is memory because it says SanDisk. They're known for NAND and memory chips. So does Sky, what is it, Skyhinks or something? It's upside down. Yes, SK Hynix. I don't know. But this is actually the CPU. This is the RAM on top of the CPU. It's a dual layer, double stack. So we can't see the CPU model, but we can see the RAM. So basically, just by elimination, baseband and memory, this must be the CPU. And meaning that it's double stacked, it basically, there's no other chips that's gonna be double stacked like this for, like in this area. So let's go ahead and get this memory chip removed. I'm gonna just do 380 Celsius with 45% air on my add-in hot air station. And one of the things about doing the donor board first, it kind of also is good practice for, you know, the customer's board, because we gotta remove the customer's chips without damaging the chips. So we could kind of practice that on this board and see, you know, which angle works best. You know, if you're struggling in certain spots, you know, how much heat ended up being required. You know, you don't want to go too hot. You don't want to damage the chip. Too much heat, you don't want to warp the chip. You know, so these are all things you can think about when you're doing this on the donor board first. And I'm gonna use this flat spatula tool. I actually got it from Union Repair as a tool, 2ULL brand blade tool kit or something. So right now, I know the memory chips have the pads way inside. So if I just put my tool like this, I could actually feel it bump into the pads. So the goal here is to just heat it until my blade can actually, pierce through the pads, which it's not doing yet. You could also kind of apply heat from the side so it goes under the chip, so it's not just all top heat. You could also heat the blade itself so it becomes hot enough where it can slice through the pads, through the solder, and help you kind of start separating the chip from the board. And you want to be real gentle. You don't want to force anything, otherwise it's game over. So this is taking longer than I expected. But this is what I was saying, it's basically kind of like practice, and that we can see. You might have to turn up the heat just a little bit. Oh, I can feel my blade going through. You guys see that? And then also, now that it's kind of going through, I could gently pull upwards. Oh, the blade going through, pull upwards, just to help dislodge the chip from the board. Oh, there it goes. There it goes. The goal is here to get this off without ripping pads as well, because this is our donor board. Or this is our, I forgot what they call it. I've heard people say this, the target board, maybe. Alright, I'm going to focus the heat. I'm real close to the chip. I said I don't want to rip pads, but my blade went all the way through. There it goes. Alright, so I don't see any rip pads, at least on the board side. Let me prep this while it's still hot. So I'm going to just use low melt here as well. By the way, the actual, even if you have rip pads, usually there's only a few pads that really matter. So it's not that giant, the entire grid, it's just a few. So sometimes you'll have a bunch of NC pads that come off. Yeah, look at that. Pretty much no rip pads, although I do see one ground pad here on the left, which it's a ground pad, so we technically don't need it. It's kind of folded over. And I can just break it off. There it goes. Yeah, ground pads are basically redundant. A lot of times there's a lot of redundant or not necessary stuff on here just for just so it looks like, in a way, visually okay. I think it'd be weird if it's just a bunch of random pads. Alright, so what I'm going to do is actually check the memory chip itself. Being that there are no rip pads on the board, then there should be no rip pads on the chip. So I'm using my polarizer lights. And you know what, let me prep these pads just to see. I want to see how this looks. Oops. By the way, usually these get real oxidized, so you can't even prep the pads that easily. So just add a bunch of solder. Just go in circles. Yeah, all the pads are there. I can see pretty much all of them. Some are really oxidized, so they're not taking solder. But you get the point. And I'm using the board as a kind of holder. Basically has a perfect spot to kind of hold it in place. There's a few oxidized pads here. No rip pads. All right, so the chip is probably still good. Also, it's good to not destroy them, because in case you do the CPU swap and it doesn't work, you can put back the donor chips back on the board and see if it boots, because you know those are good unless you destroyed them when removing them. So if you can keep them, you can use them for testing. In case, it could just be bad placement or something, but at least it'll help you rule out, is the issue on the board or is the issue the chips, right? Sometimes when you're doing a CPU swap too, you're not sure if the CPU and the memory are good. Basically CPU swaps are reserved for basically last resorts. Like there's nothing else that can potentially fix it, or you're like running out of time. You've already spent a lot of time, and you don't want to keep spinning your wheels trying to solve something that maybe you have a higher chance of solving it with the swap. But I see a lot of people who just do swaps just as a very early diagnostic step. Just crazy, but people are free to do what they want to do. And if they're constantly doing swaps and destroying phones, they're gonna have a bad reputation and lose business. All right, so now let's get this. So I'm gonna use this one as a practice run. So we're gonna get the RAM off first. So let me apply some heat. Kind of allow me to spread flux on top of the CPU really easy. So we gotta apply it from the sides. Oops, that's a lot that came out. Also wonder if that baseband chip on the side, like if I somehow mess this up, is that gonna prevent the phone from booting? I don't know. But basically now I have to put my tool in between the two layers. So I don't know if you guys can see that. I'm above the CPU, not between the board and the chip, but between the two chips, right? Oh, it's kind of hard to, there you go, right there. So basically I gotta go in through there to separate the RAM. So I'm gonna use the same temp, 380/45, and just go in circles, get my blade in there, and same thing, just see if I could get my blade. Also, there's components now around here, so you want to be real careful not to bump them, lose them. So I'm going to just rest my blade here and put very little amount of pressure just to see if I feel the blade kind of slicing through. Alright, there it goes. You can see it's going through. So one thing about this as well is depending on the design, it might be easy or it might be really hard. So I'll explain that in a second. But I'm gently, just barely a little bit of pressure, and I'm getting my tool to start kind of slicing through. Once it starts slicing through very easily, that's where you can start kind of twisting the tool to kind of apply upward pressure. So you want to be real gentle when you do that. You don't want to damage the RAM. The RAM will short out very easy if it's bent. There it goes, you can see that. But if you can slice through it, it's a lot safer, I think. There it goes. So now that it's kind of slicing through, that means most of it, oh, look at that. Alright, so we got through a quick visual inspection. Doesn't looks like the easy one, even better. So basically what I mean is it's a flat surface. So this side is flat and then that side is flat, and it's just like any other kind of reball. On some models, the slots for, well, let me check. Let me prep these pads real quick just to verify that. Just before I speak too soon. Alright, so I just prepped the pads. Okay, yeah, this is the flat surface. So this is gonna be, no, well, it's gonna be easy for me. So I don't want you guys to think this whole data recovery CPU swap is an easy job. You know, I've seen people tell me like, hey, I saw your video and I tried it and just destroyed it. I don't know how you made it look so easy, you know. So let me keep in mind. But yeah, this is a flat surface that, just like any other surface where you would do any kind of BGA work. There's some models where each pad is kind of like a little pocket that is very fragile, made out of very fragile kind of, I don't know what kind of material it is. But you gotta clean each little hole where the RAM is gonna be in, and it's very difficult to not damage it and then short it out. So maybe in a future video I'll show that. But this one seems more like the flat surface on top of the CPU. And we're gonna do the same thing here for removing the CPU bottom part. Look right there, SM8150. By the way, there is some like white gooey stuff that's kind of holding the chip. It's kind of like underfill. I guess it is underfill, but it's just like in certain spots. It's very weird. Oh, this. By the way, this CPU is very thin. You want to be careful not to damage it. If you twist up too much, you can damage it. It's like a very thin wafer. And I could kind of see it bending, so I hope it's not going to be a problem. Need apply heat from the side. By the way, any of these tools, flat tools, you can use sandpaper to try to thin them out so that they're not really thick. I'm gonna have to, oh, here it goes. I'm gonna have to sand this one down before the real customer CPU. And this is what I was saying, I keep mentioning, this is a good practice run so I can see what it's gonna be like. Trying to remove the real CPU. So just gotta keep heating. Going in circles. This helps spread the heat. And be mindful of how far you are from the CPU. Well, I'm gonna turn up my temperature by, let's do 15. I kind of went up. I did 14 technically, but just to give it a little more heat so things melt. I can see a little chunk of solder here on the right that is not melting. There it goes. Alright, maybe there's like some hard underfill under here that's making it a little harder to get it off. Alright, so looks like it's coming off, but I feel like I'm fighting something in there. Oh, there it goes. Here's the bottom of the CPU. Here's the board. So let me apply some heat. Let's prep these pads. So maybe on the real one, I'll try to slice through this white underfill like material. So just run over all the pads with my leaded solder. Alright, almost done. No rip pads, so that's good. I did have a lot of heat on it, so that always helps. Usually you rip pads when you try to pry up without applying enough heat. And this big blob of solder helps also spread some heat. All right, let's clean up some of this. Toothbrush. Like a dog hair in here. Yeah, basically like this white stuff here is on every corner of the CPU, so maybe I'll clear that out. And the next one, there are some pads here that are bridged, but those are the same line. You can see the traces are all like one connection. So just like all those you see there, where you can see the traces all connect to each other. You know, when you're cleaning the pads or prepping the pads with your iron, you know, you just tend to kind of have that happen. All right, so now let's wick this board down flat. I do wish I had the other iron set up with the 245 handle. Seems like that would handle this a lot better. This is the 210 handle, which is kind of like the medium size. There's a 245 handle, which is like a large size. Then there's a T115, that's like the micro size. All right, I feel like I'm being a little too rough. Let me get a new piece of wick as well. Well, I'm being rough because it's kind of struggling to make that heat transfer. So I'm going to use hot air and wick. This is the safest way to wick, although, you know, that does have its own risk too. It's easy to bump components because you're heating the board with hot air. So all the components nearby kind of start melting, and it's easy to bump it with your wick. So the goal here is to also, the flux tends to blow away, and now you don't have any flux on the board. And you gotta snip off sections of your wick. So what I like to do is also put flux on my actual wick as well. And what you can also do is preheat the wick so that it's already, you know, scorching hot. And then come here. And you see I'm pointing away from the baseband chip next to it. But yeah, you can see why the chip wasn't lifting. This temp is probably not hot enough to get all these ground pads. Alright, so not picking up any more wick. Let me snip off the end. Add more flux on both the board and the wick. Preheat the wick. And then basically brush the board. This wick as flat as you can. I think I got most of it. Let me just try to get a few more little pieces. Let me just try to absorb some of the flux that's just still here. So this hot air. There's actually these random ground pads here. I don't know if I need to flatten them out. I guess I'll check later. All right, so now we gotta clean off all this burnt flux that's on here. We want the pads nice and shiny and silver. We don't want any yellowing or anything like that. Then I'll UV mask like those bridged pads just so it provides a uniform surface. Now we still gotta wick this part too. So let's do that real quick. Hoping this side should be easier. I'm using some leftover flux. Okay, this chip is easy to solder and everything, so this is not really a big issue. There's a CPU where you really want to make sure you're like basically a perfect reball and a perfect install. All right. I gotta clean all this. So as you can imagine, I can no longer test at this point. So we just gotta assume the board is still good. Just trying to clean it as best I can. We want a super clean surface for this. Is that some lint? Yeah. Some random dirt. You don't want any debris of anything on the surface because that will mess up your install. And so we lost another pad up there, but it's also ground. So, and I know it's ground. I don't even have to check with my multimeter. You see the trace? You see like the pad and a little trace out into a wide open plane. Same for these. All basically these three right here, 4, 5, 6. You can notice which ones go out to ground. If you're unsure, you could also diode mode the pad or whatever left of it, or the trace, to see if it's actually ground. But you can see this trace goes out to nothing. Whereas, for example, this one is just an encapsulated kind of trace or pad. Right, you can see the outlines of these. So you really gotta like learn to pay attention to that kind of stuff. That way you could save time. You know, I don't have to get my multimeter and measure anything. Oh, you know what? Let me get my tool here. So we're gonna use some UV mask. I'm gonna squeeze some out onto my little pry tool here. All right, and I gotta pull back the needle so it doesn't keep oozing out. This is the tool UV green mask stuff. So just for a good measure, we're gonna put a little bit right there. A little bit right here. Pretty much anywhere there's like some bridging. Although it's not required, you can probably get away with it. Although it can, I can imagine it might cause the chip to, I don't know, maybe it could be an install issue. So just so I don't risk it. Oh, my hands are real shaky. Oh, there's a big blob. These all look fine. All right, so now that I've got some on there, I'm gonna try to thin it out too. So basically just spread it out. We want it thin. If you have it too tall, then it could mess up the reball. Not the reball, but the install after the CPU is reballed. Is that all I put? All right, and it's fine if it's over the. Let's see how does it look with the polarizer. There's a UV light to cure it. And then we're going to come back and scratch out any other pad that might be covered. So like that. I mean, most of these are ground anyway, so they don't really matter. Ground pads don't matter. All right, so I mean that should be, oh wait, I think I missed this one. Something like that. And that first one, I think I need to. All right, so this is where I get in trouble. I'll get too focused on trying to do that and then end up messing it up. So I'm just gonna stop. All right, so CPU area prepped, UFS. Some people might call it NAND, which is incorrect. It's a UFS. By the way, this is why it's useful to write donor. That way, in case you're just not paying attention, you can quickly look and like, okay, I'm for sure still working on the donor and not, I didn't accidentally mix them up or anything. So keep that in mind. All right, so here's the customers. So on this one, I actually removed the shield by prying it off, and it wasn't pretty, so don't judge me on that. Actually, let me shift this up so I have room for my tool to enter. All right, so here's the real deal. We gotta remove this. By the way, for stuff like this where I can't mix up chips and stuff, I use my little work area here on the left where I have like a little cutout, like right here. I basically use this to put the ICs that are important that should not be lost. Like the chips I pull from donor boards, I put them off on the other side. And this is just kind of like my way to ensure I don't mix up chips or anything like that. So if you remember, I had to go to 395. Maybe I'll also bump up there just a little bit. 55, 395, 55. And that was for the CPU, but I'll just go ahead and use it here as well. The memory, UFS, NAND, hard disk, whatever you guys want to call it. It is very, not very, but it's a lot more, they're generally more able to handle this than CPU. So I'm just gonna do the same thing. I'm going off in the sides. This also helps clear out that white underfill stuff. Plus, when you're heating in circles, it helps evenly spread the heat. I see my tool slightly in frame. There it goes. And this one also says 128, by the way. There it goes. Tool is going through, and alright, I'm coming up. There it goes. Alright, so this is the real deal. So we gotta make sure not to break this or damage it. So it's still hot, so let me prep it. Essentially run over all the pads. Yeah, it looks like I got pretty much all of them. I'll spot clean it later. I don't want to keep burning the iron over the chip and then like damage the surface area. So, all right, I'll put this off to the side to my designated area. Alright, so now gotta get the RAM off. Now with iPhones, since the iPhone 7 and newer, you can get the CPU and the RAM off in one chip and somehow nothing happens. For this one, I don't know if that can be done, so I don't want to risk it. I could have practiced on it, but I didn't. Alright, so we're going to get this RAM off, because if you try to do it as one chip, both of them together, and the RAM messes up, now it's real hard to get the RAM off once you get the CPU off the board. The CPU right now acts kind of as a holder for it, but once you get it off the board, you basically have no easy way to separate the two chips without potentially damaging something. Alright, gotta get my tool in here. There it goes. There it goes. This is way higher heat, so it looks like it's gonna come off real easy. And while it's still hot, so let's try to take advantage of that. So like I said, this is a customer's board, so we could destroy it, like remove some of the components, so we could clear out some of this underfill stuff. The board itself doesn't work anyway. You know what? I forgot this step. I should prep this top area first. That way, like I was saying, the CPU basically acts as a holder. So if I could prep it now, then it's ready to go later. So let me just run my iron over all the pads first. Be real gentle. You don't want to be all rough on it. Remember, this is CPU. Now for this one, I'm going to use my iron. I feel like it should be pretty easy to wick. Yeah, look at that. There's a lot less thermal mass on a chip than on a board. Essentially, thermal mass is basically what sucks away the heat. At least my understanding. It's my layman's understanding of it. And the higher thermal mass, the more heat that gets sucked away when you apply heat. Because just a general, by the way, I never put the RAM is impaired, by the way, too. So I forgot to put it in my designated spot. But basically, law of thermodynamics is always trying to reach equilibrium with everything around itself. So when something's hotter, it tries to get colder. At least, I don't know. Someone can explain it better. Let me know in the comments. And if you're enjoying the video, don't forget to like it, subscribe if you want to see more videos like this, and share this video with all your repair tech friends. I'm sure I'm gonna get some haters talking crap about my technique, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter as long as I'm successful with these jobs. I'm no CPU pro by any chance, but I do have a lot of experience with repairs. Alright, so you can see the CPU is prepped now. Let me apply some new flux. Let's do this again. I was saying we want to clear out any of that white underfill stuff. Let me rotate this so I get on this side as well. And let me pop these off, get these out of my way. Right, so just heat in circles. I'm still at 395 temp. Here comes the tool. I'm kind of focusing where my tool is so I can slice through. Maybe I can get through here in this. Right. Let me try from this side. There it goes. Alright, I don't see any ripped pads or anything like that, so I think we're still good. Alright, so now let's prep these pads on this side. Now there are these little capacitor looking things here on the bottom. I'm not too sure what they do, but I'm just going to try to make sure not to lose them. I do have a spare CPU to pick some from in case I do lose one. Now I just recently saw a post on the Facebook group saying that they're not needed for data. Although if you're going for full fix, then maybe you should replace it. But I don't know. I mean, personally, I think CPU swaps should be for data only. But I can understand in some places, you know, these iPhones are expensive, like in some other countries. So sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do. Alright, so looks like I was able to prep most of the pads. Some look oxidized. Alright, let me do this. Let me wick it real quick, at least as best I can. Sometimes the wick also kind of scrubs the oxidation off the pads. Although this flux is all burnt now. It's almost there. I'm trying to concentrate, but then I forget I'm recording a video, so I gotta, and I hate long silent pauses when I'm watching other people's videos when they're doing stuff like this. You know, you gotta keep talking so it's entertaining. When it's long pauses, it kind of cringe moments for me. I don't know, what do you guys think? Do you guys agree with that? Do you also want to keep hearing someone talking? Or would it not bother you to just have me go silent to trying to focus on something? And I guess I would say it is a skill that you can develop, being able to concentrate on what you're doing plus speak. Because I don't know if I was able to do that well in the beginning of doing the YouTube videos. All right, so I'm gonna heat up. This is probably stuck, so I'm gonna heat it up so I can get it up. I'm gonna get a clean cloth, so we clean it and see what we're working with here. And just a little backstory on this phone. So the story is that the customer went to a repair shop. I guess they were swapping out the battery, and oh no, the customer tried to swap their own battery out and damaged the connector. Another repair shop tried to repair the connector, and then the phone just stopped turning on. So who knows exactly what happened. I checked everything I could. I was injecting voltage. Like I have, there's no board view, there's nothing out there for these, so I just had to give up and just offer the CPU swap as a last resort. Android phones in general are very hard to find solutions, but if you do know any solutions and you want to get paid for sharing them into the repair wiki by Louis Rossmann, let me know. I am officially hired by Louis Rossmann to manage the repair wiki. So if you're watching this and you know solutions that you can document, let's get you paid for contributing. So I'll link it down below in the video description where I talk about the repair wiki, or just contact me through my website and let me know. Just browse the sites, repair.wiki, that's the URL, type that into your browser, repair.wiki, and check out all the different devices that are there. I did from iPhone 7 and newer, I think up to the 11 or 12. This was like last year. I filled in like all the solutions that I know of, like step-by-step process to diagnose and repair. And then now we need other people to step up to the plate and do the same for other devices. This is funded through his charity, Repair Preservation Group. Essentially the goal is to share information so that repair shops can be profitable and remain in business, because the bigger the repair market, the better it'll, long-term life and how do you say it? Viability. We want the repair market to thrive, and if we're all just hoarding solutions, then sure, your repair shop might thrive up until you run into problems you can't solve, and because nobody else wants to share their solutions, basically will die out. So the repair, the phone repair industry is very, or basically a lot of what we do is kind of gray market. The manufacturers don't always officially support us, so we're just doing things on our own. We could do a lot of repairs that the manufacturers don't offer, so a lot of customers appreciate that. So we're doing what we can with all the restrictions that are on us. So a good way to make sure we thrive as an industry is to share solutions. Don't be afraid of losing to your competition. If you share a solution that your competition can use, you should focus on your customer service to win over customers. If it's you versus your competitor, and you both know a solution to fix a certain issue, who's going to win out? I'd say a majority of customers prefer, customer service versus, the lowest price or the fastest repair, because it's so stressful, leaving your phone behind. If they have someone they can trust, even if they have to pay a little more, they'd go with them. Kind of like a mechanic, right? You want to take your mechanic to someone you trust. You know, they're gonna have your car. They can joyride with it. They could, you know, go through your center console and stuff. But you take it to someone who, or they can make up issues that don't exist and want to charge you for it. Same thing, you know, you gotta focus on customer service so customers trust you and they'll never go with anyone else. There's always, once you find someone you can trust, that's who you stick with. So don't be afraid of sharing solutions, because your customers will still come to you if you are, you know, nice, you give follow-ups, you keep people updated on the status of their repair, even if it's taking longer than expected. Just a simple like, hey, you know, we're still working on it, give me a few more days and I'll let you know. Stuff like that goes a long way. So yeah, basically, if you want to share any solutions and get paid for it, let me know. I just got a lot of pads here to clean off all this oxidation. I'm just doing it by hand. And really, you just got to scrape out just enough to expose. Well, I mean, you're going to scrape out a good section of it, but once you get that, the solder will pick up on the pad and the rest will kind of burn away, or it's easier to deal with after. And there's different ways to deal with this. If you've seen my iPhone, I think iPhone 10 bottom board swap video, I show a trick to, also my baseband video, iPhone 7 Plus baseband. Essentially you put paste and flux, and then you put a CPU on top, and you basically hot air and kind of scrub it. If you don't want to do that, you could also just use paste, solder paste, and just kind of scrub it around, and then run your iron over it as well. Essentially the goal is to scrub it so it kind of like exfoliates the chip, so to speak. You know, like that body wash that has all the little scrub, I don't know what it's called. I'm sure you guys know. Or it feels like there's like sand in there. That will help scrub these pads and expose the shiny silver part. Now, why does this happen? I'm not too sure. My understanding is there's oxidation, maybe too much heat. It kind of coats that oxidation on top. So yeah, this is the fun part. And by the way, this is why it costs so much to do CPU swaps and stuff, because everything you do, you gotta be real delicate. If it was any other chip, you could probably just be a little more rough on the chip, trying to prep the pads, and that'd be enough. All right, let me see. Do I see any more gray pads? Nope. So let's try to prep these pads again and see if we got all of them. So any more flux? Oops, I got one of those caps on my iron. Where is it? Oh, look at that. I was able to push it back into its spot. Alright, let's keep going then. Let me add a little more solder to my iron. The goal is to get them all shiny. All right. Okay, so I'm just gonna leave it like that. Let me clean off some of this flux. I think it's a little too burnt for my taste right now. Plus you don't want the flux to be burnt into the pad, because each pad is kind of recessed by a fraction of a millimeter. So that's why sometimes you're running the iron over it and it's not picking up, because that blob of solder in your iron is not making it inside the little pad pocket. Let me see the chip. Also just checking to see if it's kind of warped. It looks fine. Alright, so I'm just scraping these to see if there's any oxidation on them. I think just my iron couldn't reach in here. I gotta clean this off. You see some pads here that look oxidized, so let me clean them up a little more. Gotta be careful not to scratch the surface of the chip. All right, here's some more. All right. Let's just go ahead and wick this flat and try to reball it. All right, let me get a fresh piece. Well, not a fresh, but let me put my, oops. Clean, yeah, I was saying, let me put the clean side of the wick on the board. All right, let me rotate this. Looks like I don't have any flux here on this side. I wonder how long this video is going to be. I should have looked at the time that I started recording. So I kind of get an idea, but oh well. Alright, I mean, I got most of it. I don't want to risk messing up those caps. I'm assuming they're caps. So I'll just leave it as is. I use the clean cloth itself as well. I did suck up some of that solder from that cap there. I was worried it's gonna be too thick, but we'll see. All right, let's give this a try. So this is a stencil, right? You can see the shape of the caps. So let's match it. So like this. And you'll see that stencil itself also has like little cutouts for those caps. So that's cool. All right. Now, here's an important part. So remember, these are double stacked. We want the board and CPU, the balls from there, to be higher temp. So I'm gonna use regular 183 paste, and then from the CPU to the RAM, those balls we want lower temp. That way, if we do the reball and let's say something messes up and I just want to take off the RAM but not disturb the CPU, if I have 138 or 148 on the top, then I could get that off before even the 183 solder on the bottom, melts. So that's kind of the thought process here. So I'm gonna I have some paste here, which actually looks a little bit too dry. Although I think I just prepped it yesterday. I don't even remember. All the days just blend together sometimes. Alright, let me have a bunch of lint on here. You know what, let's try it. Alright. So the trick to a reball is to apply the paste like this and just make sure the chip underneath, in this case the CPU, does not move. So look at the parts that are not covered in paste yet and make sure you only see the pad. If you start seeing half a pad, that means the chip is shifted and stencil is no longer aligned. Alright, and then you'll notice this paste is very putty looking. It's not super shiny and glossy. That's the texture you want your paste. If it's too shiny and glossy, there's too much flux in there, and that flux is going to bubble, and the solder that's within the paste in there is going to bubble up and kind of jump to other pads, and now you're going to have uneven pads. So once you do this, you want to wipe down the top layer. This helps kind of even out the pads and absorb. If you have very watery paste right now, wiping it down like that would have helped a little bit. Also for these, since the chip is so large, you could kind of go a little bit over the pads and it'll still reball fine. So I'm going to heat up in circles and just kind of, no rush on this. You want to go real slow. Let me zoom in a little more so you guys can see. Actually, let me make a little smaller. All right, so I like to angle it kind of like a 45 degree and just go in circles, just monitor the paste, look at the texture, and then I'm starting to see oh, there it goes, the solder balls are forming, so just focus on one corner and just let them form very slowly, no need to rush. All right, I'm gonna work my way downwards on the left side. And then just focus on this corner. And come back up. So remember, heat spreads, so you don't have to physically move your hot air closer. Just keep applying the heat and it'll eventually make it. All right, so now I got all the solder balls formed, although some are not touching the pad. I'm going to shift this over. All right, let me see what happens. All right, as you can see, a lot of solder balls are not connected to the CPU. This one doesn't even have a solder ball. It might be on my tweezer. But you know what? That's fine. We can solve this. Get a blade. While it's still warm, you can slice kind of all the solder balls that are kind of sticking out of the stencil. This will even out the solder balls that are left behind. Also will help All right, I'm not gonna apply any paste right now, but maybe on the next one. So I'm gonna do the same thing. Reflow this. Same technique. I am going a little faster, if you notice, but that's because most of the solder balls are already soldered onto the CPU. Alright, so now you see a lot better CPU reball, but we're not done yet. There's still some solder balls that are not attached to the CPU. So like right here, there's a few. So here's a trick. Just reball right on top of it. And we only need those areas so you don't have to do the whole board. And then when you're doing this, you'll end up scraping off the top again. Or you can come back with your blade and pick up kind of that top layer. Get some of that paste off. Reball one more time. I see a lot of flux in my paste. So I'm going to start here at the bottom, which will be safer than the top where there's a lot of flux. Good news is now all the solder balls look attached, I think, potentially. I see one here that might not be. looks better. You know what, let me do this. Let me poke it through. See what's going on under here. Maybe I'll clean it and then do it one more time. Oh, this looks pretty good. I wonder if I could just poke out those missing pieces. Alright, so looks like there's a solder ball here that belongs to here. Oh, where'd it go? Alright, well, I lost that piece. Alright, let me clean this and try again. This is the fun and tedious part. Pulling the CPU, prepping the board. That's the, I would say that's the easiest part. Making sure your reball is super clean. It's the hard part. Let's clean it real good. Alright, this is the back side. This is the side that's on the CPU, physically on the CPU. So you want to make sure that side is really clean. And then here's the top side. Here's where we apply the paste, which is already pretty clean anyway. So just to be sure, make sure you dry it out. Now here's the tricky part, is cleaning the CPU without damaging it. Let's just some alcohol and toothbrush. By the way, don't mind my tweezers, they're kind of bent. Alright, let me see. I'm thinking I'll reflow it with hot air. Clean it one more time. Because after a while, what happens is the, layering on the paste will. All right, so I heated it up a little bit. And I'll apply some paste so it's easy to spread. But yeah, after multiple layers, the solder balls and paste and stuff isn't as clean like you're seeing now. So let's go ahead and try to reflow this so it looks cleaner. Alright. I do see some pads you can tell they're kind of smaller than the rest. So we're gonna have to definitely need to reball this. Although if we can figure out if those pads are ground, then maybe not. And maybe it's not necessary, we can leave it as is. But I don't know that. Alright, so this looks pretty decent. What do you guys think? Let me know down below in the comments. Rate my reball of the CPU. Obviously there's still some work to be done, but there's your sneak peek of first try. Alright, let's try this one more time. This time, since they're solder balls, it's real easy to align. Wait, hold on. Right? Pretty much not going to go anywhere. So, let's do this. Let's shave off the top again. I'm sure there's... Oh wait, hold on. I see something. The stencil's dirty. By the way, I don't think my 99% alcohol is actually 99%. Because anytime I clean something, there's always some like residue left behind. So I'm pretty sure that's the impurities in that 99% alcohol. So if anyone knows a legit place to buy alcohol, I may consider it. Although it depends on the price. If it's too expensive, then I'll just deal with the impurities, I guess. Alright, so let me reapply some more paste. Where does this lint come from? I just cleaned it and now we had a big lint hair thing. Alright, I'm just gonna do this whole area that was not shaved off. Because in theory, if it didn't shave off, it means there's not enough solder there to pop past the height of the stencil and get shaved off, right? So when you do this, you basically leave behind just the smaller pads. Oops. Alright, I think I'm still in the reball temp, yep. So like I mentioned in my add-in review video, it kind of sucks that when you lift up the handle, you don't know what temperature it's going to. I wish I would flash that for like a brief second maybe, or some solution. Because sometimes, you know, I'm like changing temperatures a lot. And I'm not sure, wait, was that my reball temp or my high temp? Or my shield removal temp, which is super, basically almost maxed out settings. Oh yeah, look at that. Now it looks perfect. Alright, just to be sure, I'm gonna shave off. So in theory, they should all shave off evenly. That means they all have plenty of solder in there. And yeah, look at that. Look at that. So this is going to be a good reball. Let me try to get some of this here. So this one pad always seems problematic. I wonder if it's the cap is lifting the stencil past too much. But you know what? I'm just going to wing it. And hope for the best. So let me reflow it one more time and this should be good to go. There's no additional solder paste added. So these would all just form into their spherical shape. And in theory should be all equal size. And because they're all soldered already to the chip, It doesn't matter, like it's easy to reflow it. You don't have to worry about anything messing up. Now, oh, just like I just jinxed myself. I lifted the stencil too early, and I was saying how you can't mess this up. I think I just did. Well, it's not a real mess up. It's just a little mess up. I could reflow it one more time once I get this off. So just gotta make sure you do this while it's still warm. Otherwise, it's going to stick to the stencil. Alright, so let me clean the stencil just to make sure it's ready in case I need to reball it again, or if I have another LG V50. Now, nice thing about, if there's a nice thing about this, is that once you do one CPU swap of this model, once you're done with the job, you can just remove the chips, give the chips back to the customer like in a separate baggie as like here, you know, for whatever reason, if they need a redo or something, or they lose their data somehow, but they still have the board and the chips, there's still a chance to get data again. So you always give back the customers their chips. But for other jobs, for other customers, if you have another of the same model, you already have the board prepped, it's known good. At least it should still be known good unless something happens where it gets damaged. You know, you basically have a board ready to go, which makes it nice because you can skip a whole section of this process. Alright, let's reflow this. So gently apply heat so the flux spreads. Alright, and then reflow the solder balls. Reflowing the solder balls. Alright. So what do you guys think of my solder balls? They look nice and even. I would say this is good to go. So what I'm going to do is, you know, this is a dual side chip. So let's see if we can clean off this back side without messing up the top side. Alright, maybe now I'm going to have a bunch of lint on the other side. If someone has a better method for this, let me know in the comments. Well, lint is fine, I think, since it'll just burn away. Alright. But also I hate when there's flux on the bottom side of the chip and then it gets stuck on where I put it. Alright, so the CPU is ready. Now let's prep the RAM. So this one we can replace in case it got damaged or whatever. We can use the one from the donor board. And this one is the one we reball with lower temp. So I actually like the solder paste for the sandwiches for this. Plus I already have it right next to me. I don't have the 138. So the sandwich paste is 148. So slightly higher temp, but alright, look at that. I was able to prep all the pads I was able to prep all the pads almost, so 2 more. All right, good enough. I was able to prep most of the pads. All right, maybe with this wick we'll, nope, I see the oxidation. All right, this is very burnt flux. Like burning through these little cotton, I always forget, foam swabs. I always forget the word. Foam swabs. I'm always thinking cotton swabs, but these aren't cotton, these are foam. It's hard to get that out of your head. All right, where's that oxidized pad? Disappeared. Well, I don't see an oxidized pad, so we can just go forward with the reball. By the way, the chip isn't perfectly wicked, but that's fine. We're just gonna go for the reball, and this one seems to be kind of symmetrical pattern, so we don't have to worry about orientation. So this is, like I said, this is 148 paste. It's been sitting out for a while, so let's see if I can actually use it. Yeah, there it goes. Oh yeah, there's lint on it from it just sitting on my bench, but we got it all in there. All right, this one, well, I'll just wipe it anyway. Oh, it's very dry looking, so oh well, I'll just do that. All right, let's give this a try. This is lower temp, so in theory it should melt faster when reballing. So yeah, there it goes. Solder balls are already forming. But either way, do the same thing. Go real slow. You don't want the solder balls all forming super fast, because that's how issues can happen. Plus low melt solder like 138 and 148 is very brittle, and it takes forever to cool down. All right, careful with this part. You want to make sure your solder is solidified. Just poke it through. All right, let me clean the stencil first. All right, it's getting pretty late here too, so I hope it's successful this one try. Otherwise, I might have to finish recording tomorrow. Alright, so stencil out of the way. So there's a lot of chunks of paste that got flattened out. So let's just try to clean it first. And that's not working. So a few options. We could just manually, like, you just gotta literally touch it and it kind of comes right off. Although very tedious work. Now these are like literal flakes of solder. So oftentimes the solder is so minimal Now you can just reflow it, and wherever it goes, and who cares? It's gonna be very minimal. So let's just do that. It's not that much at the end of the day. First is kind of warm it up so you can flow the flux over all the pads. And the surface tension does tend to cause the flux to avoid certain pads sometimes. There you go, you can see my reball. Let me put this under, it might help the camera. I mean, that looks pretty good to me. So I'll just leave it as is. I'm going to put it off to the side. And then lastly, this is an easy one. The UFS, or memory, or whatever you want to call it. The NAND hard disk, HDD IC, I've seen people call it. So this is just a standard, what is it called? BGA 153 or 169. Let's try 153 first. So this one has an extra dot on the upper left, and I think it's moving. Where's, it's hard to find the layout. There it goes. Yeah, 153 worked. BGA 153. Alright, so just use any paste. It's a really easy reball. It's a 2D stencil, so you make sure you're proficient in 2D stencils, because these move around a lot. So you got to learn how much pressure to put when you're holding it, you know, how much pressure holding the stencil, how much pressure applying the paste. But if you can kind of manage that, then using 2D stencils is no problem. It just takes some practice. 3D stencils, they're nice too, but sometimes you just need, well, usually 3D stencils are thick, so it kind of complicates the reball process. And most stencils that are on the market are 2D. There are some 3D ones for all the common stuff, but not everything. So, you know, learning 2D stencils is key to being able to do a lot of stuff. Alright, so let's poke this out. And just simple reball. Clean it up because I know I'm going to use this stencil soon. I might have to use it again tomorrow. I have another phone here that I need to do, a Motorola G Power. I don't know, maybe I'll record it. We'll see. Let me know in the comments. Do you guys want to see more CPU swap videos? I do a lot of Android ones. They're often much easier than iPhones. At least for me. I don't know, maybe I'm just really bad at iPhone stuff, but for Android phones, this is very routine for me. And if you're watching this and you need your data recovered, or you're a repair shop and you want to outsource your data recovery jobs to us, send me a message, go to my website, literally right there at the bottom of the screen. Alright, so now we have all 3 chips reballed, and time to start the process. All right, so this is a customer's board, so let's get rid of this. I'll put it way over here so I don't ever mix it up. I am now on the board holder. So let's do this. Let's do the easy one first. The memory. Look at that. So RAM, CPU, and UFS. So let's get started. I'm going to put these CPU and RAM off to the side. We're going to do the UFS. Thin layer of flux. The chip still has flux on it. I'm just going to leave it like that. And this tends to help. And remember, we marked this side down here. So there's the marker up here. So we got to rotate it. Oh, look at that. We're at Alright, so one thing you'll notice is these Android phones have little markers so you can align it. So that's another benefit to doing Android jobs. Also, I'm going to start low. I'm using my reball temp of 330 to warm up the board and get the kind of process started. I don't want to go too high. Now remember, on this one we use 183 Celsius temp paste, so it's lower temp than the factory solder, but higher temp than the RAM reball. So just don't forget your temperatures, very important. Alright, so I've been heating this for a while. Now I'm going to turn up to 350 and see if this installs it. I'm seeing flux kind of starting to ooze out from the sides. That usually means it's getting ready to start flowing into position. And I'm going to turn up the heat just one more step. This should push it over the edge and get it installed. You should see the chip move. There it goes. Alright. I'm going to gently bump it. Make sure. Alright, I said gently and that was a disaster. But these pads aren't that close together, so we'll be fine. Now this one is the tricky part. I'm going to use rosin. So, I don't know if you guys see that? Mechanic rosin flux. This essentially, I wish I had the pen, like the vape pen thing. Essentially stick your iron in here and just hover it over where you want a thin layer of basically flux in a smoke form. This allows you to basically apply flux to the board without having a really thick layer. But you got to do this with your fume extractor off, otherwise the smoke goes into the fume extractor. Alright, that's enough. I'm sure that's not healthy, although I'm sure a mask wouldn't help. Alright, so this one, you can see like a thin layer of stickiness, and you can see where the caps would go. So if you look at the bottom side of the CPU, And actually the top side also. There's a little arrow here, and this is where we marked it. Alright, I'll try to align it perfectly. Alright, this looks perfect. We'll see. 330 Celsius. Crap. Alright, I'll edit that out. Just kidding. I went in too quick. Alright, real far away now. Oh God. Maybe I just need regular flux. Maybe I'll turn down my airflow 10% and just heat from real far away. The goal is to kind of melt or start flowing some of that flux. That does help with the stickiness of the chip to the board. So I don't know if you guys can see, but I'm slowly inching in closer. Getting real close to the chip. We're also not making any sudden movements. Chip hates wind when there's no flux. Okay. I'm pretty close and chip hasn't moved, so that's good. I guess that means it's accepting the heat and not running away. Although I do see the pads on top of the CPU are melting. I'm wondering if I should turn up the heat. I'm just going to manually go up in temperature but leave the airflow real low. Although I don't know if that made much of a difference. Alright, I'm going to go up on airflow to 20. A little more force. Alright, I'm going to go up to my number 2 setting. Now I'm putting some real wind on here. Some good airflow. Alright, just gotta slowly work it. You don't want to rush because you don't want to have to lift the CPU and wake the CPU and all that fun stuff. And speaking from experience, many times where I had to redo the whole CPU part. And when it's double layer, it's even worse. You might as well just go home, go to bed, go to sleep, and wake up the next day and start fresh. Alright, so I'm not seeing any flux. Let me All right, let me do this. I'm gonna apply a little bit of flux in the corners just to see, because the flux itself is a good indicator as to what's happening based on how it's reacting. Without it, it makes it kind of hard to know, like, am I heating it enough or not enough? Let me see, can I bump it? It's not. Oh yeah, this did require higher temp, and I was trying to wick the pads. Although I do see flux here on the sides of the CPU. I do see the CPU move a little bit. Okay, yeah, this thing is installed. So we're gonna hit it in a big circle for a little bit. Alright, so now goes the RAM. So I do see a lot of pads that are they're sticking up. They're not flats. So just because I don't want to mess up, and I don't want to mess up and have it be because of those pads, I'm gonna try something. Alright, I'm gonna get a fresh new wick. Alright, I'm gonna try 350. Hold on, let me first heat up my wick. I'm gonna head off to the side. Yeah, look at that. I'm able to wick the pads. Without hopefully messing up the CPU. Alright, so I got flux. I didn't put too much heat, so that's why I didn't clean it. So I'm gonna put the RAM now. Alright, so RAM goes, oops. Like this. Just to make sure I'm not crazy. Yeah, like this. Alright, let's see. This is the final step. If this works, I'm gonna be very happy. Well, I guess the customer will be happy too, but I don't know who the customer is, so I can't be happy for them. I'm doing a visual inspection from the side just to see if it's lined up. I'm also doing 330 Celsius. Remember, this is 148. 148 Celsius solder. I think it's already installed. There it goes. I see it going into place. And look, this temp definitely not hot enough to melt the bottom, the CPU. It looks like it's hot enough to melt the RAM, which means I can bump the RAM without messing up the CPU. Alright, this is gonna work. I don't know. To be honest, removing the CPU was very sketchy. I mean, the CPU is a super thin wafer, basically, of a chip. All right, I'm also gonna let it cool down naturally. I don't want to mess with it, but I'm hoping this is good. All right, whatever. I'm gonna mess with that. I'm gonna drop some alcohol so we can kind of clean up all this extra flux everywhere. I really hate. You notice in all my videos I'm wearing gloves. I just hate the texture of sticky stuff. So I always clean it, even though it's probably not necessary, especially for data. We're not going for long-term reliability. Like the flux eating away the pads over 6 months. This is just for data, but I don't know, it's just something. It's kind of soothing too, just cleaning out making the board look extra clean. All right, let's do a visual inspection first. See how visually everything looks. So I'm gonna hang this off the edge of my bench. All right, so memory, you can't really see. All right, look at that. That looks extra clean. All those solder joints look soldered on. We can't really see the CPU underneath. It's a very tight spot, but the RAM looks good. Looking down the side of of course, I wish I could curse, but this darn lint, and by lint I mean my dog hair, my dog's hair on here. All right, I mean visually it looks fine. Let's see what happens. All right, let's get this board into the housing. Screen, battery, charging port. All right, the moment of truth. Is this gonna work? USB meter looks good. Oh, charging symbol. All right, so charging symbol is good. Let's see if we get the battery percentage. Come on. Yes, there you go. We're gonna have a successful data recovery. All right, let's prompt to boot. And all right, logo, LG logo. Now I don't like to celebrate fully until I'm at the home screen. Even then, I gotta make sure I back it up, extract all the data as soon as possible, because I've had cases where the device is working, I don't back it up in time, or the phone just dies in the middle of the backup and then it just never comes back. So, plus, a situation like these two, you could end up with a boot looping device, who knows? There could be a lot of things that happen before you actually get the data, so I don't like to jinx it and celebrate too early, but I'm pretty excited about this one. Especially because it's here on camera, so this one's gonna be a good one to post. And if you guys enjoyed it, let me know down below in the comments. I'd like to hear your feedback. Oh, look at that. Password to unlock. Do we have touch? Do we have touch? Yes, we do. All right, let me get the password really quick. All right, typed it in, click done. Didn't work. Oh, great. All right, so I tried the pin code in 2 variations, and I'm not gonna try anymore. There's obviously 8 attempts left. So for now, I'll have to contact the customer and figure out, exactly what's going on. But it looks like it's stable, touch is working. We should be able to get into the phone once we get the pin code. So just real quick, I wanted to show you guys, I actually ended up getting the pin code and we're able to unlock it. The phone is functional and we can get the data off of it. So I currently have it in USB debugging mode. So there's a whole process to enable that. Once you plug that into the computer and you run the Cool Muster software, which looks like this, Cool Muster Android Assistant, you can then, the tool will connect to the phone and install the app necessary for the communication to work. And then here you can see I can get the contacts, the text messages, photos, videos, and export them to the computer. I don't know why the SMS shows 0. I'll need to look into that. But this is how I do data recovery. So if you want a link to this software, I will link it down below. It is not free, but it's definitely worth the money. I think it's about $30 or so. So one data recovery job should pay for it. And I use this all the time for Android devices. All right, guys, so that one was a fun one. It is a pretty long video, so I'm sure like almost nobody is here at the end. But if you do want to support what I do here on the channel, doing CPU swaps, sandwich reballs, all these, repair videos, check out the t-shirts like this one. I would do it, but I don't have the tools. I don't know why customers say this, like it's somehow going to change the price, or I don't know. But it'd be a funny shirt to be wearing when a customer comes and wants to say that to you, and then they realize it's a meme. So check out down below the repair wiki as well. So if you want to contribute, reach out to me. I do have a locals community. It's a private forum where I post there regularly, and you can post there as well. So I hope to see you guys there. I'll also link to all my tools from this video and all the other stuff I use all the time down below. And I will link to another YouTube video right here where I did a Samsung CPU swap. So thanks everyone for watching. Make sure you subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.